He went with us. We went to Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku, we crossed the Peruvian-Bolivian border. That in itself was a little adventure. I do not recommend that people who want to go see Tiwanaku cross the Peruvian-Bolivian border by Lake Titicaca. It's basically a den of rats over there when you cross that border. We had the government following us as soon as we crossed the border into Bolivia, because we were bringing some cameras and some tripods and things of that nature. We didn't even have that much gear. We were trying to fly under the radar, and we had one large bag, duffel bag with gear in it, and it was not easy getting it into the country. One of the first things that you'll find out in Bolivia is they do not want you. They don't even like you taking photos, but they definitely don't want you taking video of anything. They don't want you taking footage of anything. They're very hardcore about it, and so we had eyes on us from the moment we walked across the border in Bolivia. And for people who are not familiar with Bolivia, this was my first visit to Bolivia. I figured that Bolivia and Peru would be very similar. I was wrong. It was like two different worlds. Crossing from Peru, which is very friendly to tourists. The major part of the economy is tourism. They love outsiders coming in, especially Americans are treated very well. When you cross the border into Bolivia, all of that ends. When you cross the border into Bolivia, you are not wanted. You're tolerated in Bolivia. You're not received with any kind of approval or joy, for sure. I mean, you're tolerated. Your presence is merely tolerated, and it's a very bizarre, surreal situation. It's the best that I can describe it, although I've never been there, is North Korea. I think it's the closest that I'll ever come to being in North Korea, being in Bolivia. That's how bad it was for us. We had eyes on us. We had people following us. We were very uncomfortable the whole time. We felt like we were being listened to and watched the entire time as soon as we crossed that border into Bolivia. So Tiwanaku is a famous area for those who are familiar with the Ancient Aliens series on, I think it's the History Channel. They do a lot of stuff in Tiwanaku. They make a big deal about Tiwanaku. A lot of guys have gone there and used Tiwanaku, the whole Tiwanaku area, as supporting evidence for their ancient astronauts theory. So we wanted to go there ourselves with a biblical perspective and take a look at it and film and do our own analysis of what we found. And what we found was just as astounding, if not more astounding, than what you see on television. We realized right off the bat that the whole Tiwanaku area is locked down and controlled. It's like a police state when you walk into that place. I mean, all of Bolivia is like a police state, but when you go to Tiwanaku, you are in very unfriendly territory. Just recently, about 5 months ago, they decided to clamp down even tighter in Tiwanaku. They introduced ropes, and they introduced more laws, more regulations for tourists. You're not allowed to even touch the rocks anymore. For example, Puma Punku, which is a part of Tiwanaku. Now, let me explain this. Tiwanaku, there's a bunch of different ways to say this stuff. You'll hear it pronounced differently, said differently, and written differently on all the different shows that feature it. Even in Bolivia, people say it differently. So it's really confusing. The whole area is called Tiwanaku. When you pull up to it, it's called Tiwanaku. Now, the town there's a town right there, right in the area where all these ruins are. The town is called Tiwanaku. So the town's called Tiwanaku. All the ruins are referred to as Tiwanaku. So it's very confusing. And then within the ruins, there's different areas. There's Puma Punku, which is the most famous area and the most impressive. And then there is the other side, which is often just referred to as Tiwanaku. So it's very confusing, and I didn't know any of this going in because this was never made clear on any of the programs I've seen. And I've seen all the Ancient Alien stuff and a lot of these guys, the little productions that they've done on their own. Some of these guys that are featured in Ancient Aliens, It's a very different situation than what you're led to believe on television, at least the impression that you're given. One thing that they definitely never have shown is how oppressive it is. I mean, it is extremely oppressive. The whole Tiwanaku area is oppressive. You just have an oppressive feeling there. Again, you're being watched. You feel like you're hated. They hate you. By the way, Americans have to pay $100 extra just to get into Bolivia because they especially don't like Americans. So they really let you know that when you're there. For example, they told us that.
Tim,
yep.
Let me interrupt here too, ladies and gentlemen. Even today in Bolivia just signed a deal with Russia for 20 state-of-the-art fighters. The president of Bolivia has no love lost for the Americans, but I need to give a little background, Tim. What's happened in Bolivia, in the specific area Tim's talking about, is there's a whole new dig that's been found of underground pyramid structures. Now, for Doug, as long as I've been on talk radio, you've heard me enough to know, I've told everybody, it's not what you see above ground. It's what you see underground, or for more importantly, what they won't let you see underground. It's true all over the world. Now, why I brought up the Russia card is this. I was told, I've said this so many times, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but this will explain. Tim, your actual words were, it's like a bunch of Gestapo there. Those were your words. And I think what people need to understand is that they have, from the even 2 years ago, the security and the direction that tourists are even allowed to go has changed dramatically. I call it the inverse liar's lie, okay? That's a new term for you tonight, Doug. The inverse liar's lie. The more of the truth they uncover, the more they have to lie. And in order to protect that, they'll now go to any extreme to make sure you don't see anything you're not supposed to see. You don't film anything you're not supposed to film. And, Tim, I want you to deal with how they actually moved the Temple of the Sun from the older, I think people are, I don't want them to miss this. This is critical. In other words, they have moved it or staged it, placed it on a platform that's a whole different post-flood set of archaeological findings. And the old, because of the relationship to the old, the forbidden zone, if you call it that, in Bolivia, they don't want two and two put together. Now, spell out for people the difference between antediluvian and post-diluvian from how you saw it and how you'll be describing it in the video. Because this video, ladies and gentlemen, we're trusting that anybody who gets the video is going to understand the biblical response, the twisting of secular history, the New World Order's spin on the ancient aliens, and we'll explain later on the show how the Catholic Church, and look, this isn't an anti-Catholic statement, but how everywhere we went, the Catholic Church has been absolutely covering up, taking up, stealing, and doing whatever they have to do to make sure the artifacts of what we're talking to you about tonight do not see the light of day until it's time. So, Tim, explain that, because I thought that was one of the most fascinating things that I've ever heard, because when you see the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, even watch any specials on it, you'd swear, forgive me, you wouldn't swear, but you would declare that, you know, it's not even accurate, is it, in its juxtaposition of how close it is, i.e. the old architecture versus the new. In other words, the giant fallen angel buildings versus who came afterwards.
That's right. That's exactly right. That was something that really astounded me when I got there. I thought Puma Punku was further away, and it was a completely separate archaeological site, and then what's referred to as Tiwanaku, like on the Ancient Aliens program, they refer to it as Tiwanaku, that is in a different area entirely. But when you get there, you realize that's not true. It's literally to walk from the Puma Punku site to what's glibly referred to as Tiwanaku. It's like a 10-minute walk. I mean, it's like, you know, walking, 200 yards or so. And it's all right there. So right when we got there, we thought, well, this is interesting. This is all kind of compact right here. We didn't expect this. And we went over to Puma Punku first, because I was more interested in Puma Punku first because It was acknowledged to be and is acknowledged to be by a lot of archaeologists an older construction than, again, what is glibly referred to as Tiwanaku, and that is true, and it's even more true than they can imagine. But the Puma Punku site is the site where, to give people a reference, it's the site where you find the famous H blocks. If you watch the Ancient Aliens, or if you look up on the internet, you type in the H blocks of Puma Punku, you'll get those famous H blocks. That's the Puma Punku site. That is very distinct and separate from the rest of the Tiwanaku area. Now, we right away we discovered some very interesting things about the Puma Punku site. Most of what is there, the grand majority of what is there, is still under the ground at Puma Punku, and it is under the ground. I mean, it's not like there's ruins all over the place on the Puma Punku site. No, it's only where they've excavated, and where they've excavated, everywhere that they dug a hole, they, of course, they dig like these rectangular, very nice, neat excavations. Everywhere where they dug these little rectangular excavations, you see massive monolithic stones jutting out of the ground. And you see more of Puma Punku under the ground. And they've only gone down, right there at that site, they've only gone down, God, I can't remember, maybe 4 feet, 5 feet down into these rectangular concaves in the ground where they're excavating. And the very first thing that I thought when I walked up was, why in the world did they stop? That was the very first thing that came to mind. Why did they stop? A lot of people will go to Puma Punku and will concoct these wild speculative conjectures about aliens, and that the H blocks were used for landing pads or a runway for alien craft, and it was an alien base and all. And I think it's really laughable. With all due respect to those guys, it's really illogical and laughable when you're actually standing in Puma Punku, because anybody with half a brain is going to recognize immediately that this thing is under the ground. Whatever it is, what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. Whatever was there is under the ground, and for some reason, the Bolivian government does not want to delve further into it. It was just a couple little rectangles, pulling up some of the H blocks, and that's it. I mean, that is the first thing that hit us immediately when we walked up there. And I wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be a well-excavated area. You would think that, wow, they found this amazing architecture, these unexplainable, megalithic blocks. You think that they would delve deeper into it, want to uncover it, and try and figure out what it is. That is not the case at all. They give you a little peek. It's like pulling the corner of the curtain back, giving you just a little peek, and that's it. They don't even let you touch the stones anymore. We did, of course. We distracted the guards. But anyway, what we discovered in these constructions, and this is visible, obviously, this is visible in a lot of documentaries that have been made, is the absolute precision that you find in Puma Punku. And I'm getting to the difference between Puma Punku